welcome to Odd Socks. It's 2023, start of the new year. It's cold mid-January weather at the moment, so we're going to be mainly focusing at the moment in this month of exactly what we're hoping to achieve in 2023 this year. This is the perfect time to be in the warmth and start planning your growing season for 23. And I like to have a nice piece of paper, and I like to make lots of notes and decide what we're going to grow and where we're going to grow this year. So January we very rarely sow. The light is just too little, it's not very warm, and sometimes we've started our seeds off in January indoors. But with the cost of living as the way it is, having extra heating for the seedlings and having extra light for the grow lights, it's just something we're not going to do this year. And to be honest, whenever we've planted early January, whatever we've planted by mid-February when the light gets better, it's always, the February plantings have always caught up to the January plantings. So this time of year is the perfect time to plan out how you are going to achieve your end goals. But the end goals, what exactly do you want to do? Is the allotment just to get out the house, just to have a play around? Is it just to experiment? Is it to actually grow produce for food throughout the year? Now mine's the third. I want to be able to produce as much as I can on my own plot. I'm under no illusion, we can't do the whole lot all in one go. We still have to buy in vegetables and fruit and things like that, because obviously there is certain things we can't grow that we enjoy, oranges. But I am going to try a lemon tree this year. So, but it's to help our food. Now, whether it's cost effective with the money that you plough into your beds in the first place, or whether you want to know exactly what's been sprayed onto those fruit and veggies, what they've been grown in, the nutritional benefit of growing your own far outweighs anything that you can buy in a local supermarket. So when we're deciding on what crops to grow, well, I always sit down and ask myself a few questions. So one, will I eat it? Now, I grew last year certain lettuces, and I probably had about 60 plants. Didn't like the lettuce, didn't like them at all. There was a particular squash that we grew that it was only me in the house that actually enjoyed it. So this year we're gonna, yes, try new things, because unless you try new things you're never gonna know. But we need to focus on produce that I can either eat at the same time as when we harvest, freeze, store, jar, or produce actual whole meals out of it, which can go into the freezer and be taken out a few months later, whatever the time is. Makes life easier. That's what I'm all about. I'm trying to make my life easier with the produce that I grow. Another question is, can it grow in our climate? Now, each year has been so different for growing. Last year was extremely hot, extremely dry for the whole year. The year before, it was warm, but a little bit wetter. So you never know what year you're going to have. So there's always a risk of something that you're going to decide to plant that is not great with our climate or the weather that's going to happen at that year. So there's always a risk of something that you're going to plant may not actually succeed for this particular growing season because of the way the weather happens to be for that year. Is it hard to grow? Is it something that's going to need so much care to look after that by the end of it, for a very small harvest, is it actually worth it? How much of it do I actually need to grow? As an example, onions. If you think about it, I use onions probably on average every single day, between 1 and 2 onions when I'm cooking. That's a lot of onions throughout the whole of the year. Now, I'm not going to be planting enough onions to give me all that produce throughout the year. I will actually buy in, otherwise I'll end up with a whole plot of onions. But I will be planting some. Lettuces. Last year, it wasn't just the 60 lettuces of the horrible tasting ones I did. I also did an awful lot of others. And because it really is something that we have to use fresh, we just didn't get through it enough. Even when we were giving away lettuces, it just wasn't enough. And then this year, I want to grow the lettuces for the leaf. So we're picking the leaves off on a regular basis. So we get more lettuce leaves for our buck instead of actually picking the whole lettuce itself. Another thing is beets. I grow beetroot. I love eating beetroot. Now I make sure that I can grow enough where we can eat fresh throughout the growing season, but also where I can actually put it into the freezer. Beetroot freezes really, really well. Sometimes parboil the beetroot. Sometimes I'll just literally clean it and put it into a freezer bag for the freezer. And this allows me to have beetroot to use throughout the whole winter season and the cold months. Nice beetroot soup or something like that, or within a casserole, or however you want to prepare it. So working out how much you would like to grow against how much you would actually use it. How much space do you have? Now, obviously, we don't have acres and acres of land. We probably barely have anywhere near an acre, nowhere near an acre. But how much space do we have to grow the things that we want? Now, with no-dig, the great thing is about no-dig is that you can multi-sow. So multi-sowing, you will sow 3 or 4 seeds of something and you will plant them actually together on the no-dig bed. And it works brilliantly for majority of the things that we grow on this plot. So as an example, as the beetroot, I grew them in clumps of 4. So when I put them in the ground and they grew from a clump of 4 seedlings, the biggest one I would gently take out as I wanted to harvest, which then left enough room for the rest to start putting on more growth. And that's how I did that. You can do the same with a lot of other things as well. It's not just beetroot. You can multi-sow multiple places. I know leeks do very well being multi-sown, unless you want to grow the big monster leeks, and then obviously multi-sown is not the way to go. But I'm quite happy with the smaller leeks to the medium-sized leeks. That suits me down to the ground. How can that produce be kept after harvest? So this could be quite an important thing. How are you going to store the excess food that you're growing? So I try to make sure that if it's something that can't be frozen, that we can make a preserve, or I can actually can it and water bathe it into a jar to make a sauce or something like that, or to make into meals. Again, the short shelf life. I don't want to end up with too much produce in one time where I actually can't physically use it and it gets wasted. Obviously, there's always friends and family we can gift to, which we do, which is great to do. But at the end of the day as well, we want to make sure that we have produce throughout the year. So it might not be loads. It wasn't tons and tons last year of extra produce that we did, but I did manage to get half a chest freezer full of produce from the allotment that I was able to use and still use through the year. I also made chili sauces and tomato sauces and a ton of other things that I made with all the tomatoes that we managed to grow last year, which I think with the tomatoes we did well over 80 kilos of tomato harvest last year. So with that glut, what are you going to do with it? Now, you can freeze tomato. and they go very hard and they freeze into perfect little balls. They're brilliant, they're really, really good. And then you can literally just tip them out into a pasta sauce to make, and they'll defrost within the sauce. I decided after 2 or 3 days of making tomato based sauces that's what I was going to do with some of the leftovers. So I've got multiple bags within the freezer of just literally whole tomatoes that I can literally cook down or just add to dishes. Obviously you can't really eat them as fresh because they won't have the same texture as when they were first picked off the vine. But now I've got 2 pressure cookers. I'm really hoping this year that any tomato harvest that we have will not take me days and days to actually get through. Cooking in a great big stock pot on the stove for 4 or 5 hours to reduce it all down. Hopefully with the pressure cookers I have, we'll cut that right down and it will make my life a lot easier. So for me, you can see there's a lot to think about within what we're going to actually grow and where we're going to grow. I'm not worried about crop rotation this year. I'm not too bothered about that at all. Literally will be, if we do re-sow certain seeds in the same bed as we did last year, I'm not going to lose any sleep over, because the soil should be absolutely fine to be able to do that. So we have multiple different beds. The potatoes will be going straight into the actual ground, which will be rotivated in the next couple of weeks. No dig beds that we've got that will do carrots, peas, beans, parsnip. We can even grow our potatoes in no dig beds. You don't have to go into the ground or do anything, but I'm trying to save a bit of space with the potato bed and putting them into the ground. We've got cabbages, we've got broccolis, we've got sprouts to go in, we've got more strawberries, we have pumpkins, squashes, all sorts of stuff that will be growing through the season. So we planted garlic late last year, and thankfully we had a good cold hard snap, which will hopefully help split the bulbs. We only bought 1 bulb of elephant garlic because we just wanted to see if we could try it, and it's not exactly the cheapest thing to do, but what we'll do, we'll of course, if it does split and grow, we'll actually replant 1 bulb of the elephant garlic to keep us going through it. We also managed to find some, I don't know the name of what they were on the garlic, but it was some Spanish garlic and also some Chinese garlic as well. Both were from the supermarket, to see if we could actually grow. The Chinese version, not done great. We're yet to see any growth in that, and that was put in 4 weeks before the Spanish garlic, which has all started to sprout, which is great. Garlic, we use a lot of garlic in the home. It gets put into sauces and eaten and roasted, and it's just fantastic. The purple sprouting broccoli, we started late last year, so that's actually sprouting at the moment. We've managed to keep tidying it up. It's the first year down here that we've obviously grown that, and it's done okay. So on one of the plots that we're using this year, there is established blackcurrant plants, and I'm really kind of looking forward to working with a lot of blackcurrant to see what I can make, see if there's anything different I can actually do than the usual. But again, berries freeze so well. I have still got loads of raspberries in the freezer. I've still got a load of blackberries, because we've got a wild blackberry bush here that produce the most fantastic massive blackberries. They're really, really good. So I'm interested to see what happens with the blackcurrant bushes this year and to see if they're actually going to produce. We've also planted raspberries last year. A couple of the canes that I'd actually bought and put into the ground actually died, which was a bit disappointing. But I've been growing raspberries in the back garden for years and always had a good crop. Late last year I actually took them all out. I took off the suckers, I put them into a tub of garden soil and left them so I could actually still have something left of those raspberries in the allotment itself. So the raspberry canes that I actually bought was a spring variety and a autumn variety, so I could try and have raspberries throughout the year. Raspberries is something I absolutely love fresh, but frozen, they work just as well. So we moved those raspberry canes out of the old site that we'd actually just dug into the ground, and we've moved them to some no dig beds to see if they'll actually survive a little bit better there and not have to compete with all the bramble that was actually mixed in around the raspberries themselves. We've also late last year started growing blueberry bushes. Now I think I've got 4 blueberry bushes on the go, but I really do need to pop them on because obviously blueberry bushes get quite large, so that's something that I'll be doing in a very short space of time. And then there's tomatoes. So this year we are building a polytunnel. We're going to be producing some tomato plants outside like we have always done and always had a good crop, and then we're going to be planting some inside the polytunnel, kind of as an experiment to see actually the difference between the two. So one of the reasons I enjoy growing is so I can actually make full dinners. So I can either add the fruit or the veg to the actual main recipe, or as side dishes, or any other thing like that. So throughout this year I'm going to be showing you ways to prep these fruits and vegetables, ways to store, and ways to use them in recipes, hopefully for some really good recipes, and ways to eat the produce that you've managed to grow.